My wife was glowing on the day we signed our divorce papers. Sunlight poured through the courthouse windows, catching the diamond earrings she had bought with money I helped her earn. She leaned back in her chair, smiling as if she had just won a championship instead of ending a marriage. Then she looked directly at me and whispered, "You'll never find better than me." The words landed harder than the judge's final signature. Around us, people shuffled documents and exchanged polite goodbyes, but all I could hear was the confidence in her voice, the certainty, the belief that she had broken me beyond repair. She had spent months preparing for that moment. She took most of our friends, destroyed my reputation with carefully crafted stories, and walked away with a life she believed I could never match. I remember watching her leave the courthouse. She never looked back. 3 years later, at a luxury party filled with executives and flashing cameras, she froze when she saw me. For most of my life, I was the person people overlooked in a crowded room. I wasn't loud, flashy, or naturally gifted at drawing attention. I preferred listening to speaking, building to boasting. While others chased recognition, I focused on the work itself. That included my marriage. When I met Claire, she was ambitious, charming, and capable of making anyone feel like the most important person in the world. I admired that about her. For years, I supported her career, celebrated her victories, and quietly handled the responsibilities that allowed her to pursue bigger opportunities. From the outside, we looked like a successful team. Behind closed doors, the balance slowly changed. The more successful she became, the less visible I seemed to her. My advice became background noise. My sacrifices became expectations. When something went right, she accepted the credit. When something went wrong, she found a way to place the blame on me. I convinced myself it was temporary. I told myself marriages went through difficult seasons. What I didn't realize was that she had begun viewing my patience as weakness. Many people made the same mistake. They saw a calm man and assumed he lacked ambition. They saw kindness and assumed it came from insecurity. They mistook silence for surrender. That misunderstanding would eventually become my greatest advantage. The warning signs never arrived as dramatic arguments. They came disguised as small moments that were easy to dismiss. At dinner parties, Claire would interrupt me halfway through a story, then smoothly redirect the conversation toward herself. Most guests never noticed. I noticed every time. When colleagues complimented one of my ideas, she would smile politely before explaining how she had helped shape it. The room would nod, and I would let the moment pass. At first, I told myself none of it mattered. Then the pattern became impossible to ignore. I remember standing beside her at a charity gala while she introduced me to a group of investors. Her hand rested lightly on my arm as she smiled and said, "He's brilliant with details. I handle the big picture decisions." The investors laughed. So did she. I smiled with everyone else. Inside, something felt different. Over time, she stopped asking for my opinion and started announcing decisions she had already made. Vacations, investments, social commitments. She informed me rather than included me. The most revealing moments were always the quietest. A dismissive glance when I spoke, a pause before introducing me, the faint amusement in her voice when she corrected me in public. Each incident was small enough to explain away. Together, they formed a picture I could no longer ignore. Claire wasn't simply taking me for granted. She had stopped respecting me entirely. The moment that changed everything happened 6 months before the divorce. Claire had been invited to speak at a major industry conference. Hundreds of people filled the auditorium and cameras streamed the event online. It was easily the biggest opportunity of her career. I sat in the audience, proud despite everything. Halfway through her presentation, she shared the story behind a project that had transformed her company. As she spoke, I felt a strange sensation growing in my chest. The strategy she described wasn't hers, it was mine. Every key decision, every solution, every breakthrough she proudly explained had come from late-night conversations at our kitchen table. I had spent months helping her solve those problems. My name was never mentioned once. The audience applauded. She accepted the praise without hesitation. Something became painfully clear in that moment. This wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't poor communication. It wasn't a rough patch in a marriage. It was a choice. For years, I had protected the relationship by minimizing every disappointment. I'd kept giving chances because I believed effort could fix anything. Sitting there beneath the bright stage lights, I finally understood a simple truth. You cannot save a partnership when only one person is protecting it. The realization wasn't dramatic. There were no angry confrontations or emotional speeches. I simply stopped making excuses for her, and once I saw the situation clearly, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. For the first time in years, I chose myself. The decision to leave wasn't emotional. It was strategic. While Claire assumed our future was secure, I began quietly preparing for a different one. Years before our marriage, I had built a successful consulting practice, specializing in business, operations, and contract negotiations. Most people saw me as quiet. Few understood how much of my career depended on patience, planning, and reading situations accurately. Those skills suddenly became useful in my personal life. I spent months organizing financial records, reviewing agreements, and documenting every shared asset. I met with attorneys, accountants, and advisors not to attack Claire, but to ensure every decision would be supported by facts rather than emotions. The process taught me something important. The strongest position rarely belongs to the loudest person. It belongs to the person who prepares. Meanwhile, I stopped arguing. I stopped defending myself against minor accusations. I stopped chasing approval that was never coming. Claire interpreted my silence as defeat. That worked in my favor. The less resistance she encountered, the more confident she became. She believed the divorce would follow the same pattern as the marriage. She would control the narrative while I quietly accepted whatever remained. I never corrected that assumption. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life before the marriage had even officially ended, strengthening professional relationships, expanding my business, and investing my energy where it could actually grow. By the time the divorce papers were ready, my future was already under construction. Claire just didn't know it yet. The divorce itself unfolded exactly as Claire expected. She walked away believing she had won. Friends stayed in her circle. Social invitations continued arriving. Online, her life appeared flawless: luxury vacations, exclusive events, carefully staged photographs that suggested complete happiness. I didn't challenge any of it. Instead, I disappeared. For nearly 3 years, I focused on the life I had quietly started building long before the marriage ended. My consulting firm expanded beyond anything I had imagined. Clients recommended me to other clients. Partnerships grew. Opportunities multiplied. Success arrived gradually, then all at once. The real payoff came on a crisp autumn evening at a private charity gala held inside a glass-walled, luxury hotel overlooking the city skyline. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors. Soft music drifted through the room while executives, investors, and public figures exchanged conversations over champagne. I was speaking with a group of business partners when I noticed movement across the room. Claire, she had spotted me. The confidence on her face vanished so quickly it was almost startling. For a moment, she simply stared. Not because I looked different, because everything around me was the people greeting me by name, the opportunities being discussed, the respect in every conversation. Nothing had been taken from anyone. Nothing had been forced. The consequences had unfolded naturally. While Claire spent years proving she didn't need me, I had spent those same years proving I didn't need her, and the difference was finally impossible for her to ignore. The room seemed to slow as Claire crossed the ballroom toward me. When she finally reached my side, her hand lightly touched my arm. "Honey," she said, forcing a nervous smile. "Do you remember me?" The question wasn't really for me. It was for herself. She was trying to reconcile the man standing before her with the version she had left behind. Years earlier, around us, people exchanged curious glances. Several guests knew my story. Others knew hers. Nobody interrupted. I smiled politely. "Of course I remember you, Claire." For a brief second, relief appeared in her eyes. Then she noticed something far more important. There was no anger in my voice, no resentment, no longing, nothing she could control. The realization hit harder than any insult ever could. She hadn't lost a husband that night 3 years ago. She had lost someone who genuinely believed in her when nobody else did. As conversations resumed around us, I returned to speaking with my colleagues. Claire stood silently for a moment before walking away alone. No dramatic confrontation followed. None was necessary. My reputation had recovered. My relationships were stronger. Most importantly, my self-worth no longer depended on someone else's opinion. That's why this story matters. Many people spend years trying to prove their value to someone who has already decided not to see it. The greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's building a life so meaningful that the people who underestimated you become nothing more than a chapter in your success story. After Claire walked away that night, I stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out across the city lights. Years earlier, I would have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt peaceful. The strange thing about healing is that it changes what victory looks like. In the beginning, I wanted people to see the truth. I wanted those who had doubted me to admit they were wrong. But time taught me something better. The approval I chased was never the prize. Freedom was. Freedom from constantly proving my worth. Freedom from shrinking myself to fit someone else's expectations. Freedom from confusing loyalty with self-sacrifice. Over the following months, my life continued moving forward. The business kept growing. New opportunities appeared. More importantly, I built relationships with people who valued honesty, respect, and mutual support. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving. I was living. Occasionally, someone would mention Claire or ask if I regretted how everything ended. I always gave the same answer. No, because losing that marriage forced me to become the person I was meant to be. Looking back, I no longer see the divorce as the day my life fell apart. I see it as the day my real life finally began. And as I watched the city glow beneath the night sky, I smiled at a simple truth. The greatest loss in my story wasn't the woman who left. It was the man I almost became. If I had never let her go,